This is Autoline After Hours, unscripted, uncensored, unapproved. Hey, everybody. Thanks for joining us on Autoline After Hours. I have no idea where today's show is going. We got some topics we're going to talk about because maybe you heard there's a lot of action in the automotive industry these days. So we got Thule from Sino Auto Insights here. We've got Sam Abuelsamid from Telemetry. And of course, Gary Vasilash.
How you doing, John?
Has blessed us with his presence. I'm doing pretty good. You too?
Good.
Yeah. So let's get into it. Next week, both you and I are going to be in Shanghai at the auto show there. I mean, we got to kick off with something. Let's kick off about something that's coming up. And I'm pretty excited about going there. What do you think you're going to see, or what are you on the lookout?
Wait a minute. I thought auto shows were dead too. So explain to me why would there be such a thing? And then Sam, we're going to hear, because you just came back from the New York Auto Show this morning.
Yeah, so we'll get into New York too. But
I thought auto shows were dead. So tell me about Shanghai.
So I normally am pretty good about remembering numbers and statistics, but I need to read this. And maybe you know some numbers about New York, but there's going to be 1,000 exhibitors
in
Shanghai from 26 countries, 360,000 square meters, so about 17 football fields. There's 1 million square feet in New York. 1,400 vehicles, 93 world car debuts, 93. And some notable reveals will be Neue Classic cockpit, because they were leaning into software.
Who? Neue?
The BMW.
Oh, BMW. Excuse me.
And so, it's going to start. It already has. Xpeng did a World Brand Summit in Hong Kong on the 15th. You and I were invited, but we decided not to go because we were going to be in mainland. I'll be there starting Sunday, and then things will start kicking off with media days on the 23rd and 24th.
Mm-hmm.
I think that with the tariffs, the tragic accident with the Xiaomi SU7 recently, I think there's going to be a little bit of uncertainty from some of the Chinese players with regards to how flashy they want to be. But also...
Oh, they're going to want to be flashy. Come on,
it is Shanghai. It is Shanghai,
it's a car show.
So the last thing is, I think there's this dichotomy of the foreign automakers trying to sell to Chinese consumers and the Chinese EV makers looking to show off to the rest of the world. I think that's what's really, really kind of
so what do you know, my sense is, at least with General Motors, I think they've hit bottom in China. That's my sense.
Have they? I was just going over some numbers this morning with Kaylee Hall from Reuters for a piece she's doing. Buick, over the last 4 years, their sales in China are down 65%.
Yeah.
They've gone from over 900,000 to about 300,000.
Yeah, no, I think GM in general is about
continuing to sink.
50% down, right? But I'm saying this year, right now, first quarter, it looks to me like GM and maybe some of the other foreign automakers have hit bottom, i.e., they didn't continue the bleeding in the first quarter. So that's what I'm wondering is, have they finally gotten enough NEVs in their lineup that, they've staunched the bleeding for the moment?
Well, okay, what's your sense of the receptivity of the Chinese public to buy foreign brands now?
Well, I've been told from folks in China that GM has hit a bottom. The folks that haven't are Volkswagen Group, specifically like a Porsche, okay? And I don't believe the Chinese consumers hate Western brands. I just don't think the products resonate. And to John's point, that's a slow slog. Although John Lawler said this week on a Bank of America interview, they can do China EV Inc. can do clean sheet to job one in about 18, 20 months. I don't know any foreign OEM that can do that. But remember, they have platforms, they do simulations instead of physical prototype parts and stuff.
And with an EV, it's a lot easier to do that as well.
You're talking about the foreign car companies. I mean, these are like, you're mentioning Lawler. I mean, Ford. I mean, it's not, for us, it's not a foreign car company.
Yeah. So, Ford doesn't really sell that much into China anymore. They export out. GM and I think I'd mentioned this last time I was here. Cadillac is now Buick. Buick is now Chevrolet. Chevrolet is kind of gone from the China market. And Chevrolet is an export brand into Latin America because they sometimes rebadge Wulings and Baojuns and ship them to Latin America. And that's where I think they still feel, GM specifically, still feels that Cadillac has an opportunity because of its premium nature. But what is a little bit different in the China market is that premium is not about the fit and finish of the interior, how luxurious the leather is. It's how connected the vehicle is. It's how safe they feel in the vehicle. And that could be a $30,000 car, not a $60,000, $70,000 car. So I think that kind of throws the traditional automakers for a loop a little bit.
Yeah,
So-
you look at the technology in a lot of these cars, like you look at a BYD Seal, and this is a sub $30,000 midsize sedan, and this feels like something that here, from any non-Chinese OEM would cost you at least $60,000-$70,000.
It's still simple, but it's substantial in its features.
Yeah. There's a lot of technology, a lot of features in there.
So Sam, you've been dealing with tech your whole life. I mean, what is it that allows them to do that at such a price point while we're not seeing that from the domestics?
Well, a big part of it is the fact that everybody's doing this on EV platforms that have gotten at least within each OEM, and then often shared among multiple brands, have gotten increasingly commoditized. And so if you think back to the 1950s and 1960s, what it was like here, automakers, they would put a new top hat on a vehicle literally every year. I mean, it was completely new body, but what was underneath was basically carryover. It's the same kind of thing. So you're carrying over a lot of the core technology. It's evolving too, but at a slightly slower pace in terms of the generations. And so you can take that battery, that motor, and set, and then put a different body, a different interior on there. That stuff's a lot faster to update. You can do your CFD for your aero, do your crash testing with all of that, and you've got the same basic architecture. And then at perhaps a slightly different cadence offset from those body changes, you're also doing relatively rapid iteration as new batteries come out, updating the motors, and it's not necessarily on the strict annual basis that we've traditionally had.
But another key thing is none of them are making money. I mean, there was even an article out this week that said Li Auto's profitable, even though the profitability is sinking. And what was the other one, Sean? Depra or something like that? Or anyway, some analysts came out and said those three companies are not going to survive. They're going to get restructured. They're going to go out of business, or maybe they're going to merge together.
NIO, that was your big battery swapping company, right?
Oh yeah, no, NIO's doing a lot of really cool stuff technologically, but they're not selling many cars and they're not making any money.
Yeah, they've sold a total of about 650,000 cars since they launched.
Yeah,
in like 2018, 19.
Yeah, so that's not a lot of cars.
And one of the things that they're doing right now is they're actually in talks with CATL to sell off their battery swapping business unit to CATL.
Yeah,
because CATL has actually got a really cool new swapping approach. They call it Chaco Swap. Which it's kind of similar to what Ample has been doing, but it's swapping modules, but the modules are a little bit larger. You get two standardized module sizes, and it also comes in two chemistries, so you can get an LFP or NMC chemistries, and it's designed so that an OEM can take these modules and they can use any combination of 1, 2, or 3 of these modules, and it can also be oriented laterally or longitudinally in the vehicle. So for different size vehicles, they got common modules in there. And the swap system, when the car pulls into the swap station, it detects what the vehicle is, which way it's oriented, and it can come in, take a longitudinal one, put another one back in. It's the same module, but can go either way. And then the other thing is, you can also, you don't have to, you can have a vehicle that's designed for 2 or 3 modules. It doesn't have to be running with 3 modules all the time. So, you can run with a single module, and then if you need to take a longer trip, you can go in and get 2 or 3 modules.
I love that idea, by the way. So you're not hauling around a bunch of heavy battery that you don't need.
You're not hauling around the batteries. You're also not paying for battery that you're not using the vast majority of the time. You pay a monthly subscription for, some number of kilometers per month of usage, and then you get to within that limit you get to swap batteries.
It's
a little
battery
more
as a service.
a
Yeah.
little more detail on that though, because Neo has now 3 brands. The third brand being Firefly, which is their mass market brand, and they haven't really sorted out the complete strategy for swapping. Because yes, they do have these CATL swapping stations. They have the Neo branded swapping stations. The CATL branded swapping stations were more for fleet, for taxis and things like that. And so think a Cadillac retail store versus a Chevy retail store from a swapping station and cleanliness and things like that, and where it's located. So I think there's this still trying to figure out what our overall swapping strategy is while we're trying to onboard or recruit OEMs to utilize our platform and our IP, because that's how we're going to end up making money on swapping. Because the Onvo, which is their mid-level brand, was very, very disappointing in sales. And the CEO of Onvo, when he came on board, said, if we can't sell 20,000 a month in the first 6 months, I'm going to quit. He quit. And so Li Auto, why they're one of the big reasons they're successful is because they're primarily China. And they were E-REV. Mostly. They have the Mega, which is a battery electric, but now everybody has a large MPV. And XPeng is being really aggressive. Their brand summit on April 15th talked about the I forget what it's called, but the flying car.
Oh yeah.
It talked about the robot for manufacturing. And it then talked about how they're going to be in 65 countries. But to your point about Neo's not going to survive, one of the professors of a Chinese university,
That's who I'm citing. He's the guy who said they're not going to make it.
He said it's 2 million. You need to be 2 million.
2 million
annual
EVs
sales.
a year, or you're going out of business.
Exactly.
So who in China is 2 million?
BYD.
Period.
Period.
BYD, right?
So what happens to everybody else?
They go out of business.
They consolidate.
And that's
they get bought by a Geely or or one of the other bigger ones, and those grow to that 2 million scale.
I think if there's any IP to extract,
Yeah.
because unless you're buying manufacturing or you're buying IP, it doesn't make sense to consolidate that way, unless the Chinese government's like, you two should get together. Even SOEs are now talking about consolidation.
No, even the government is talking
SOEs?
about forcing it to
Yes.
What is an SOE?
State-owned enterprise.
the government-owned car companies.
So there are
AAIC,
5 or 6,
SAIC.
and most of the foreign automakers are joint ventured with state-owned enterprises. So SAIC is the Shanghai that GM and Volkswagen are joint ventured with. The largest are SAIC, FAW, and I want to say
Chang'an.
Chang'an's pretty big.
Yeah. Sam, Tu brought it up earlier, this crash that happened in China. He called it the Su-7. It's the SU-7, Xiaomi SU-7, right? You pick it up from there, because talk about the crash and the ripple effect of what's happened in China since.
Yeah, so apparently the vehicle was operating on their navigation on autopilot mode, which is similar to Tesla's navigate on autopilot level 2 system. And the car crashed, caught fire, 3 people died.
Headlines all across China.
And part of the reason why they died is the car caught fire. They could not get out of the car, because so many of these modern cars, like so many of the modern cars sold here, have some sort of powered door handles, that retracting door handles, and there's not a readily accessible mechanical latch to open the door.
Tesla does have mechanical latches.
Well, they all do, but what I'm saying is they're not necessarily readily accessible, or if you're not familiar with it, if you haven't used it,
that's the key.
You don't know where it is.
People don't know where it is.
So the car's on fire and people can't get them out because there's no door handle for them.
The exterior door handles don't pop out because it's lost power, and the interior door handles, they don't know where the mechanical backup is, because often they'll be hidden down in the bottom edge of like the door pocket or something like that. And so I've written about this. This is just a terrible idea. We don't, if you're going to have a mechanical backup anyway, then why bother adding the electrical switchgear to do it? Just to have the mechanical door handle. and that always works. But one of the after effects of this is just yesterday or today, the Chinese regulators came out with a bunch of new rules as far as assisted and automated driving systems. So there's a bunch of things that they're banning, and as T did, I've got to go through the list here. But number one on the list, public beta testing programs are now prohibited. So the kind of thing that Tesla has been doing for the last decade with putting out beta versions of autopilot and FSD, you can no longer do that.
How do you say "Das ist verboten" in Chinese?
Yeah. The marketing terminology strictly regulated, so they can no longer they have to avoid terms like automatic driving, autonomous driving, intelligent driving, or advanced intelligent driving in their marketing materials. So Tesla already in China recently changed the branding of FSD. They got rid of the FSD branding and they have another name for it. Strict on-hands requirements are enforced, or hands-on requirements. So no hands-off systems.
Ooh.
So systems like Super Cruise, your hands can't go off the wheel for more than 60 seconds. Let's see, new prohibitions on over-the-air software updates. So it's more restricted. They can still do OTA updates, but you have to go through the regulatory recall process. So the cadence of those OTA updates is going to be slowed down a lot. So they can't just push out an OTA update whenever they feel like.
This is very quick to come out with this regulation. Do you think that was already in the works, or was it this accident that triggered them to say, "Damn it, we got to do something"?
They've probably been discussing this for some time, and this news probably pushed them to say, "Okay, let's go ahead and implement this now."
Yeah. So, too, what do you think? What's the impact? Because what everybody's talking about in China now is how good they are at all this advanced driving systems, ADAS and whatnot. It's been a key selling point in China. If you can't even mention this stuff in your advertising now, what happens?
So I think I said this earlier. The two things that are very important to a Chinese consumer: how connected the vehicle is and how safe the vehicle is. And the intelligent driving up until this point really implied safety, because we have LiDAR, we have radar, we have sonar protecting you. Okay, and Xiaomi being such a big brand in China, and the SU7 being such a popular vehicle, the additional wrinkle was that the person that owned the vehicle wasn't driving. So they might not have. I'm not saying the person that owned the vehicle knew the mechanical, but that created another.
I think it was like 3 university students that were in the car that died,
and they found out that it hit the barrier at like 72 kilometers, or so pretty fast. So the car wasn't braking or something like that. I think that's it was
coming up on a construction zone. The lane was ending, and the car did not immediately recognize it, and then the driver had to take over. As you said, it did not get slowed down soon enough.
So this is on the backdrop of BYD weeks ago saying we're going to offer it standard on every
God's
single
eye, right?
likely 5.3 million cars that we're going to sell this year. So the Chinese companies will immediately adhere to these new policies, but I think there's going to be a lot of room for interpretation and negotiation in the background to figure out how to practically roll these policies out. But also there are 2 or 3 companies, I think Zeekr and Xpeng, were like, we're going to launch level 3 by the end of this year. So there's that. Now, does announcements about intelligent driving get dialed down a little bit during the show that we're going to be at? I don't know. But it is pretty much a ubiquity now, level 2 plus in China for most vehicles that are above a certain price point. And it'll slow things down, but that cat is already out of that bag. And I think it won't be as marketing heavy because it'll die down for a little bit, but these accidents, unfortunately, were bound to happen just because there's so many cars that have this capability and a lot more people. There's a couple things going on. Not many people know how to drive cars that go 0 to 60 in 3 seconds in a safe way. Number 2,
And that's in this country.
Yeah, well, that's everywhere.
Yeah. So,
Right.
and yeah, I think because it seems so safe in the first 30 seconds, 1 minute, generally speaking, there's a false sense of security. And if something does happen, you do have a split second to react. And I think the difference between China and the United States is that some companies are still marketing it a certain way here, and that's not going to be happening anymore in China. So,
So if the issue is safety and connectivity, that seems to be this incident is 2 strikes, right?
well, the features. So that's what the people want, and that's a huge concern because the Xiaomi share price tanked quite significantly. I don't know how much it's gone up over the last couple of days, but there's a gray cloud over the brand for a little bit, and this is on the heels of the U7 or YU7. I'm still not sure. I'm going to have to ask the Xiaomi guys whether it's SU7 or SU7. Anyways, the U7 is, if you squint, it looks a little bit like the Ferrari SUV, and that is supposedly going to take a ton of sales from Juniper, which launched like 2 months ago in China. And
Juniper is the refreshed Model Y.
Yeah.
And to kind of, as a preemptive strike, probably to pull sales forward, Tesla has currently 3 years, 0% financing on the Juniper in China and the China market, because Tesla probably knows that it's likely going to lose a disproportionate number of sales. And it's not just the U7. There are other SUVs, especially after the Shanghai Auto Show, because there's going to be so many debuts that are going to take sales from it.
Right. So to the point of the debuts, you said something like 93 world introductions of vehicles. I mean, who are all these companies that are going to be introducing all of these vehicles?
Right. There's going to be a mix of foreign companies and Chinese companies. Some companies that you're going to just meet and see for the first time. And you're like, whoa.
Who can keep track of all the different car companies in China? There's well over 100 of them, and some are little inky-dinky ones that are barely hanging on. And I can't name them all.
Well, and the established brands like BYDs and Geelys and so on, they seem to be launching new brands all the time. Right. So now it's not just the one overarching brand, but you've got a whole bunch of sub brands within that group.
Yeah.
So what's the reason why they do that?
I think that they're learning from the foreign automakers, and I don't know any Chinese consumer that would buy a $60,000, $70,000 BYD. So you kind of got to separate that branding to premium, and they've done that with Fangchongbao and Yangwang, and they also want to be able to, just like here, have a halo vehicle to have features that will trickle down, like God's Eye, because there's 3 versions. There's a vision only that's going to be on the $10,000 sedans and hatchbacks, and then the B version is 1 lidar, and then the A version is going to have 3 lidar, and that's going to be on the premium Yangwang vehicles. So,
and what would that cost there? One of those vehicles.
Yangwang is about $1 million.
Oh,
$1 million RMB. Sorry.
Yeah.
$150,000.
Yeah.
But, and this is where BYD should be spoken about separately, because they also launched within weeks of telling people they're going to give God's Eye for free as standard. They have a megawatt charger now, and of course the China market, after 2 weeks, there's 2 more megawatt chargers that were announced. So that's
by other companies,
by Zeekr and CATL, I think. So, and we're talking 400 kilometers, 240 miles in 5 minutes.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
So when we were talking about swapping, do we need swapping anymore?
Yeah, no, that right. No, we've talked about that on the show before too.
But I think actually the swapping actually does make more sense, because when you look at the amount of power that's required for megawatt charging, especially if you've got a station with 4, 5, 6 or more chargers at that location, at peak periods when you have a bunch of cars show up at once and want to charge, now you're drawing down a whole lot of power. Whereas with swapping, if you have a commonized swap system, you can get the same kind of range added in a comparable period of time. But those modules, they go into the rack, they can be charged at a much slower rate asynchronously from the use in the cars. And so the strain on the batteries is vastly reduced. Those batteries are going to last a lot longer than if you're megawatt charging them. And there's a lot less strain on the grid and the amount of power that you have to have coming into that location.
No, that's a key point that, the utilities have got to be able to
Right.
hook up those kind of mega chargers. And that's going to come very, very slowly. Look, a DC fast charger right now is, I don't know the number off the top of my head, really expensive.
Right.
It ranges, at the low end for like 150 kilowatt DC charger, you're looking at about $75,000 up to about $250,000 for 350 to 400 kilowatts.
Right, but that's just buying the
That's-
unit
that's-
itself.
yeah, right.
That's not the
That's-
installation
Yeah,
cost.
the cost of actually getting that station set up, and if you need a substation upgrade,
Right,
now you're looking at 18 months to two and a half years
Right.
lead time,
Right.
because the transformer manufacturers are prioritizing who's getting the transformers. If you're doing a DC fast charger, you are at best third on the priority list behind AI data centers and healthcare facilities.
and
They want
and probably
all the
Bitcoin
power.
farms.
Yeah, yeah, they want all the power.
All right,
And so
right.
chargers getting wait.
So John, I've got to ask you. I mean, okay, this battery swapping means that there has to be commonization agreed to by multiple
Right.
OEMs for it to
Absolutely.
work. Okay,
And
what
10
is-
Chinese OEMs have already signed on for Chaco Swap.
right.
Yeah.
Okay, what is the likelihood that OEMs in this country would do that?
It's slim to none. It's happening in China because there's very generous subsidies to do battery swapping. Because China's trying to figure out where's this, is it charging? Is it swapping? What's going to happen? And they're subsidizing both, and they'll let the market figure it out. But in this country, there's not one penny for battery swapping. And you're absolutely right, Gary. They'd have to commonize mounting points and things like that. But, Sam brought up this great point that you can have different modules. So if you're just going to zip around in the city, you have a relatively small battery. You're not hauling around extra weight that's not needed, and you pay less for it. Your monthly
take as
lease.
an example something like a Chevy Equinox type of vehicle. Instead of hauling around 85 kilowatt hours for a vehicle that most of the time is running less than 50 miles a day, you could have that vehicle that carries, say 3 of those modules, and could have, for a long road trip, you could have, 350, 400 miles of range. With a single module, it will get you, 100, at least 100 miles of daily driving range. And you can still plug it in and charge it at home, or you can swap it. And because now you're taking 600-700 pounds out of the vehicle, it's going to be more efficient. It's going to be way less costly to purchase. So instead of a base price of $35,000, now you can maybe get that down well under $30,000, because you could actually be buying just the vehicle and you're doing battery as a service. You're not even paying up front for the battery.
That's what the
So,
Chinese do.
yeah.
That's what NIO does.
Right,
Right.
but I mean, it seems to me that one of the reasons why people are not buying EVs in the United States is the whole issue of range anxiety, which I know is, you can throw all kinds of numbers at it and point out like, oh, people only drive X number of miles per day. Right. But if suddenly I have a need to go to Traverse City from the studio, I'm going to need
a 4-hour trip.
I'm
Right.
going to need
You pop
more
into
than
a swap station, you get
right,
you get
and that's
three
assuming
fully charged modules. You're on your way. You swap again in Traverse City before you come back.
and that's assuming the swap station is A, accessible, B, open, and C, doesn't have
But
a
the
large
swap-
line.
therein
It doesn't
lies
have a
the rub.
large line out of it as the Costco
But-
gas station did this morning when I went and put gas in my
the
car.
the swap station, takes up roughly 3 parking spaces, and takes less than 5 minutes to do your swap.
The,
Yeah,
the
assuming-
NIO parking, the
but
NIO swap
assuming you
stations
can
are
get
smaller,
into
but-
it.
Well, the challenge with swapping is obviously the upfront costs, right? And trying to figure out what the utilization will be. It needs to be above a certain percent to be profitable. Number one. Number two, those batteries need to sit on somebody's balance sheet.
Right.
And if it's on NIO's balance sheet, then the path to profitability is gone. So some third party, whether it's a bank, whether it's a financial institution, needs to create some entity to have those batteries sit on it from an accounting standpoint.
Right.
And
Which is why Better Place failed.
But there's actually there's a potential business there if you can actually get swapping to scale. The advantage of actually having those batteries on somebody else's balance sheet besides the vehicle owner is that now they control those batteries for the life of that battery from the time it comes from the factory until the time it goes to recycling. And they're generating revenue from that battery throughout its entire life cycle. And then when it comes time to recycle it, then they can send it directly to the recycler. They can also potentially get some additional revenue from that the recycler then recovers from selling the materials they've pulled out of it.
Right, but it still needs heavy subsidies to
Right.
make all the numbers work.
And for me to drive up to Traverse City, halfway there, I'm going to need to stop at a swap station. And this guy is going to be carrying a whole lot of batteries that is costing him a whole lot of money because unlike a metro area where there'd be frequent swapping, this guy's like sitting there and it's like, oh, somebody's got to come up and get a battery from me.
And to Sam's point,
it's costing me money.
600,000 units for an 11-year-old company, sales of swapping didn't hit some number that made sense for a lot more people to buy swapping vehicles, right? So,
but nobody else was using those battery packs except Neo vehicles. When you've got something that is commonized across multiple brands, that's where the scale comes from. Okay, you have to have that commonality.
But I mean, aren't more companies using batteries as a structural element in their vehicles?
Yeah.
And therefore, how do you swap them?
Well, it's just like having an engine as a stressed member of the chassis. It bolts in, and that's when it becomes a structural member. So you can bolt in these battery packs, and they're structural, but you can unbolt them and take them out.
Right,
yeah, but
then the car gets really.
But part of the reason why they're going that structural approach is because they're trying to maximize the amount of battery that you get in the vehicle. Again, it goes back to the point: do you need to be carrying all of that battery all the time? If you don't necessarily need to use that module as a structural member of the vehicle.
There's
always trade-offs.
From a practical standpoint, it's like GM and Ford agreeing on some engineering, standard, right? It would be very difficult for them to do that, number one. Number two, if I'm using Neo's IP, I need to pay them money. And I think there's that element to it too that makes people hesitant. Where I see the opportunity is a desperate automaker, whether that's a foreign automaker that's selling into China. I need to make my vehicles more attractive, so maybe I'll license this technology to Neo or from Neo and turn my car into a battery. Because if you look at Renault, you look at some of these smaller entities, they're struggling mightily. If they want to stay in that market, they need to either build great vehicles in a real short period of time, or they need to partner.
Yeah.
And Volkswagen and Stellantis have already waved that white flag.
Oh, okay, we've passed the first half of the show. Sean, did we have an ad to play, or should I? Okay, I'm going to get. This is the break in the show. I'm going to give
somebody buy ads from this guy.
Yeah. No. As I'm sure most of you watching right now know, we're doing a membership drive. You can help support this show through Patreon, and we've got a link in the video that you're watching right now in the description box of how to get to Patreon. Or you can do it on YouTube too. We really need your support to keep programs like this going. And now I'll shut up. I'm not going to push that anymore. But Gary, what else do we need to talk about? I mean, I think we've covered China for the first half of the show.
I want to hear about the New York Auto Show.
Okay, let's hear it, Sam. You were there.
Well, there wasn't 93 product introductions. It was more like 9. But I mean, for at least half a day yesterday, it actually was. It kind of felt like auto shows used to feel like. We had multiple press conferences, multiple OEM, well, basically 2 OEMs that were introducing products. We started off with Subaru. They showed off an updated version of their Solterra EV and a new EV that is based on the Solterra, but is kind of more of an Outback type of vehicle with a lot more performance.
Say the name, because I can't stand the name.
It's called Trail Seeker.
Trail Seeker. I just don't. Anyway, go ahead. What else?
At any rate, you also had Kia that showed off a couple of new products, the K4 hatchback and the EV4 sedan that are both arriving this year. And the EV4 is going to have up to 330 miles of range with the bigger battery. Price point in the 30,000s, upper 30,000s range. And then what else? Hyundai showed off the all-new Palisade, the second generation Palisade. We had Subaru also had a second press conference where they showed the new Outback, which was, shall we say, controversial in its styling.
Why?
Pretty much nobody that I talked to that saw it actually likes the way it looked. It's much more bulky and boxy looking. They've clearly tried to move away from what was obviously a derivative of a station wagon, of the legacy station wagon. The legacy of the legacy is gone.
I thought that made the Subarus unique.
Yeah. I mean, it's definitely unique. And then what else? Genesis showed off a new concept called the X Grand Equator, which is a big off-roader with 24-inch wheels, beadlock wheels with all-terrain tires. Who would ever have 24-inch beadlock wheels for an off-roader? I don't know, but I think it gives some hints of
good
where
in the sand.
where
What's
Genesis
beadlock?
Beadlock wheels mean that it's used for off-road vehicles. It helps retain the tire bead in the rim. It's
bolted to the wheel.
It's not bolted to the wheel, but it's the beads. The tire bead has a different shape, and so it helps retain it in the rim of the wheel, so that as you're going over,
you don't throw a
terrain,
tire off the wheel.
You're not going to knock the bead out of the thing and lose all your pressure. And
what was the feeling like? Was it excitement or was
actually it was pretty exciting for a while there. And they also showed off their new in full scale the race car that they're going to take to Le Mans next year and run in the World Endurance Championship, and then bring it to IMSA in 2027. They had their first two drivers there. They had Jackie Ickx, Mr. Le Mans. There,
very famous race driver.
Yep,
from back when.
Yeah, he won Le Mans overall 6 times. He's won the Dakar Rally several times. He's won in Formula One and on motorcycles. He's won on everything with wheels that he's ever tried at various times in his career. And then VW showed off the Tiguan SEL R-Line Turbo, which is just basically a mix of GTI and Tiguan for their new Tiguan.
So Hyundai, Kia are dominating the coastal.
Hyundai, Kia, and Genesis.
Shows.
Yeah.
Well, then there was the Wagoneer Overland Special Edition. That was
actually not at the show.
No,
that was at the Easter Jeep Safari in Utah.
There.
The Hyundai Group and Subaru are the only automakers in the U.S. that still treat auto shows seriously.
And of course, the most important thing is Subaru does have their puppy corral there.
Oh, yes. The dogs.
Yeah.
Right. So I did something interesting. Friday, Saturday, I was in Miami because Cupra wants to come to the U.S. market. So a little bit of history. Cupra is a spin-off of Seat, which is the car company in Spain that's actually part of the Volkswagen Group. And about 7 years ago, Seat decided, hey, we need an all-electric performance brand. And they created this thing called Cupra. And I thought they were nuts. I mean, the European market is dead in the water. And the last thing it needs is another brand. And I thought
it's actually been declining. It's worse than dead in the water.
It's declining
steadily.
Right. And yet last year, Cupra sold over 248,000 vehicles. And I'm like, holy crap. But then I heard earlier this year that they planned to come to the U.S. market. And I thought, these guys are nuts. And then, of course, Trump and the whole tariff thing has happened. And I thought they were even crazy. So that's why I went to Miami. I wanted to see, what is this company about? And they're sticking to their plan. They want to be in the U.S. market by 2030. And I said, have you guys heard about President Trump and his tariffs? And they went, John, it's all going to be resolved by 2030. Don't worry about it. So their thinking is, and this is me reading the tea leaves. They didn't say this to me. They don't think it's going to end up as a 25% tariff. The feeling I got, they think it's going to be about a 10% tariff, and that they can probably live with that. But I got to drive some of their cars, not extensive driving, but very nice interior. So what they've decided 7-8 years ago is that there's a gap in the market between the Volkswagen brand and the Audi brand. So they're going right in there with highly styled cars, very nice interiors.
Edgy.
Yeah, edgy even. More performance. So you get a better car than a Volkswagen that kind of feels premium, but not at the premium price of an Audi. And so far they've made it work, and that's why they want to come to the US market.
Okay, so basically what they're saying is that, okay, electric VWs here, not selling a great deal.
Right.
Electric Audis here, not
right.
selling a great
So,
deal.
yeah,
So
no,
we'll come in and not sell a great
Well,
deal.
yeah, no,
Genius.
great thing. So yeah,
Consistent strategy.
That's right.
originally it was going to be all BEV. Market realities are such that now there's ICE and PHEV in the lineup, and that's what's really selling.
You're going to see. So that's the thing about, and now mention this one last time about China. That's where you're going to see a well-balanced group of BEVs, PHEVs, E-REVs. You're going to see a lot of that because more car makers in general, GM, for instance, has PHEVs in the market now, or PHEVs in the market now. So I think that's what's going to be exciting for you to be able to see the width and the depth and the breadth of all these E-REVs.
I can't wait to see it.
That's in my new forecast. That's what, forecasting a lot of E-REV penetration, particularly in China and North America in the next decade.
Sam, so when you were in New York, I mean, did you see companies that were introducing PHEVs or
not
HEVs
this show? No.
I mean,
well, the Palisade is available as a hybrid now. So they've taken their Hyundai's basic hybrid architecture they have on many of their vehicles, but they've swapped in a 2.5 liter turbo in place of the 1.6 that they have on most of their smaller vehicles. So that's available as a hybrid now with 330-ish horsepower, and so it'll be more powerful than the base V6 version, and should get mid 30s mile per gallon combined fuel economy.
and the Palisade's a big ass vehicle.
Yeah, it's a big 3-row SUV. And then
not Tahoe big, but pretty big.
but not much smaller than that though. So it's getting there, and the new one's a couple inches longer than the first generation. So we saw that hybrid, and then of course the Kia EV4 is BEV. So we had 3 new BEVs basically that were shown. The Genesis concept, the off-roader concept. That design does not have a grille. They're not talking about any kind of powertrain for it, but if they built something like that without a grille, then it's obviously
Let's keep the sand out.
Yeah, it's obviously they're targeting towards a BEV type of design for that vehicle.
But I mean, to Tu's point, I mean, in China now they're doing all kinds of propulsion systems.
Yeah, well, and I
it
think
seems like here there still is this binary.
We're seeing
ICE or
more.
EV.
Well, no, we are seeing more hybrids. Hybrids have picked up a lot of market share in the U.S. in the last couple of years. Now, for Toyota, I think close to 40% of their U.S. sales are hybrids now. And many,
but they've always
right.
had hybrids.
But they're also they're growing their plug-in hybrid options. GM has said they're going to bring plug-in hybrids, but I think the big thing that we're going to see in the big truck and SUV segment in particular is E-REVs. The Ram Charger that's coming later this year is an E-REV. We are going to see an E-REV from Ford, I think, in the Super Duty.
I saw your post about
probably by the end of 26 or 27.
I think that's a good question.
No, my question is, I think E-REVs are perfect for trucks and SUVs. It fits their duty cycle. I mean, the Ram Charger, they're talking 600-mile range. The key is, where do they price this? And will a hardcore truck buyer really buy an E-REV? Will they really pull the trigger and say, yep, that's for me?
And here's the thing about E-REVs. In China, XPeng is launching an E-REV that's going to have like 400 miles alone on E-REV before the engine kicks in. And it's going to have like 700 or 600 miles of range. An E-REV with 600 or 700 miles of range. It's crazy. So they're still one-upping.
And what kind of
no, but I just said,
it?
the Ram Charger is going to be 600
Oh,
miles.
really? Okay.
690 total. It's about 145 electric.
Electric, right.
But, again, for a big truck like that
Yeah.
that's
haul
very reasonable.
14,000
And-
trailers,
And the thing
14,000 pound
is,
trailer.
if you look at the amount of battery you need for those big vehicles, and you do the math, the E-REV is actually, even though it has great, you have an engine and you have a battery, it's actually probably going to be, like the Ram Charger is probably going to be somewhere in the neighborhood of $5,000 to $6,000 cheaper to build than the the Ram Rev.
Yeah.
Because the amount of battery that you're reducing there, you're taking about 9,000 or so out of that. You're adding back in about probably somewhere in the neighborhood of about $4,000 for the range extender, the fuel system, the exhaust, and so on. So you're going to have a net benefit of somewhere in the neighborhood of $5,000 in terms of cost. How they price it, hopefully, they will give at least some of that savings to consumers, so that they can have
Tavares is
more
on,
competitive.
right? So.
Yeah. Well, they need to be, they need to be competitively priced against the BEV trucks that are out there now, because those aren't selling in large part because of the price, but also because of the towing capabilities. Now you got the towing capabilities. If you can price it, at least several $1,000s less than those BEVs, now you've got something that might be more compelling to the truck buyers.
Right.
So too, in China, are the E-REVs just large SUVs, or are they being put into other types of vehicles?
Leapmotor makes
Yeah.
E-REVs, so there's
All over the map.
$15,000
Yeah.
cars that are sedans that are E-REVs. So it's across the board.
Especially when you get into tier 2 and 3 cities and rural areas of China, range anxiety is a problem in China. The big cities all have great infrastructure for charging, but once you get out of them, not so much.
There's going to be more penetration into these lower tier cities, but yeah, first of all, they're more attractive towards the Leap motors because of the price points, and then also, and this is driven by BYD. A lot of it is driven by BYD because they see the popularity of the 60-40 split between PHEVs that BYD sells versus the BEVs that they sell. And in China last year is 80% year-over-year growth just on the PHEV side. So just because of that momentum, it's going to trickle into Europe. And remember that the tariff doesn't count on PHEVs in Europe, so you're going to see a huge
Only electrics,
spike.
right?
So BYD is selling a whole bunch of plug-in hybrids and not as many EVs.
It's like a 60-40 split between
So
PHEVs.
40 for EV,
Yep.
60
for BEV, yep.
PHEV.
But I don't think they care because they control 70% of the bill of materials themselves. So they're not giving away any margin to any suppliers. And I think the batteries, the cells, they don't consume themselves. There's going to be OEMs that are happy to buy that capacity.
Yeah, they sell all those blade cells to all kinds of OEMs.
So Sam, do you see applicability of E-REVs to being different types of vehicles, or just Tahoe-sized SUVs
absolutely.
and pickup trucks?
There's definitely applicability to particularly down into the mid-size segment. Will we see them here get into compact vehicles? Maybe, maybe not. We could see them in like RAV4 CRV size vehicles in the coming years. But I think Hyundai has already said they're going to do an E-REV, which is probably going to be based on the Ioniq 9, which is it's big but smaller than a Tahoe size vehicle. They've Scout is doing an E-REV based on their trucks. That's more full size, but I think we will see that start to filter down at least into the mid-size segments here.
Yeah. So then we got to talk about 1 week from today, this startup called Slate is going to launch their inexpensive BEV pickup truck, and it's going to be fascinating to see how the market reacts to that.
So it's in my backyard because I live in Troy,
Yeah.
and I'd gotten pinged about it by a couple of journalists, and I'd heard, I was like, yeah, I'm not that familiar with it. And then I looked at old text messages, and people had asked me about it.
They've been in stealth mode, very quiet.
So, last week's newsletter, I was a little bit dismissive because of the $25,000 bogey, and if it's just a decontented golf cart or whatever, I'm not going to be that impressed. But because I have that China bias and I know what you can buy for $30,000 there. So I'm hoping that it's a huge splash.
I think where there's some interesting opportunities there. I mean, they have said that they're targeting getting a lot of customers to upsell and customize, personalize their vehicles. So for consumers, that $25,000 price point is probably going to be much more like 35 to 40. But I think where there's an interesting opportunity, especially given spy photos we've seen right now, just show a standard cab pickup, which I'm not sure how appealing that is going to be to regular consumers. If you look at the rest of the pickup truck market, very few people are buying standard cab trucks. They're buying extended cab or crew cabs. But there's a lot of companies, a lot of commercial customers that buy Ford Mavericks.
Well, I was going to say, isn't this the Maverick of EVs?
Basically. And
very simple
for those commercial customers, they don't need the crew cab for that vehicle. They're using it for deliveries. And so that standard cab form factor could actually make a lot of sense for a lot. And they are going to buy the decontented ones. They're going to buy those $25,000 trucks. So there could be a real opportunity there.
Okay, but isn't there the question about, okay, if you're a fleet buyer, do you buy from a company you've never heard of that started up 2 weeks ago versus
You buy 5 and see how they do.
Yeah.
The
buying from
interesting
General Motors
thing
or Ford?
is that supposedly rebuild is kind of the support system, and that's Bezos backed. But there are startups like Alpha Motors in California and Tilo Trucks in California that do something very similar. And design wise, they look great. They just can they catch that reshoring, reindustrialization wave and get some checks? Because that's the most important thing. I don't think Bezos is going to want to fund this thing through job one. He's going to want external. And I think part of the reason the journalists Slate was trying to get more attention is to build that excitement, right? And for that event in April 24th.
Right.
So
I know a lot about the company. I've been brought inside. I've actually driven the truck and everything. So TechCrunch sort of broke the story. Was it this week or last week?
last week.
And so I feel comfortable talking about what TechCrunch has already reported. After next Thursday, I can spill my guts about what I know. But I'm really impressed at the approach that they've taken. They've done things very, very frugally. So, unlike all these other startups that get a bunch of funding and they build these beautiful, company headquarters, and these guys are not spending money. In fact, one story I'm pretty sure I can share right now is down the street, they saw that there was some company that was revamping its offices, and they'd thrown out a bunch of office chairs, and they went, woohoo, just what we need. And they ran down and they grabbed a whole bunch of office chairs just so they don't have to spend money. And they have taken a really good approach at how to design. They DFM'd this thing to death, design for manufacturing. I don't know that they're going to pull it off, and certainly their costs are much higher than what they would be able to get in China. But for what they're trying to do and where they've gotten so far, I'm super impressed. And when I went into the meeting with the top executives, I started laughing. I knew half the people in the room.
All right,
some of them have been on the show.
Okay, so why is this not going to be the Aptera of pickup trucks, John?
I refuse to report on
nice segue.
anything to do with Aptera. When did Aptera come out? When did it first?
6 or 7?
2006 or 7.
Was it that old?
Oh yeah.
And they
I
built
was writing
this
about it
prototype.
back then. Yeah.
And my buddy Paul Wilbur was brought into the company to straighten it all out, and he did all these things, and then he finally gave up on it. Until they put sellable units on sale and start selling them, I refuse to report on anything to do with Aptera. Remember Elio? Everybody was, Elio, and they brought the General Motor plant. And to me, I have to be careful how I say this. I don't think they're deliberately trying to scam people, but until they start selling these things, this thing's a scam.
So again, my question, why is this Slate not going to be?
Or the ELMS?
Okay, so number one.
At least the Slate is something, is a vehicle form factor that is, I think people would be more inclined to buy than this little
Correct.
3-wheel teardrop.
Wait
that
till
Aptera is
everybody finds
building.
out that the Aptera doesn't meet any safety standards. They'll tell you, oh, it meets every safety standard there is. It's classified as
It's
a motorcycle.
yeah.
So it meets every motorcycle crash standard. It will not take any side impact. It will not take any rollover, front impact or rear impact like a regular car will. The Slate truck will do that.
Well, to be fair, I mean, and I don't have any verification of this, but I asked the same question back in 2009 when I talked to then I think head of marketing comms Marquez McCammon, who runs Karma Automotive now. I specifically asked them about the safety aspect of it, and this is 16 years ago. Because it is
Think
a three-wheeler.
about that.
As a three-wheeler, it's
years ago, and they're still not in production.
It's classed as a motorcycle. They said they were designing.
You got to
it
give them credit for being sticking around, though.
Right.
Well,
You
they
can
did.
fool
They did
some
go
of the
bankrupt.
people all of the
It's called
time.
persistence.
They did go bankrupt in like 2011, and were gone and were revived around 2018 or 19. But at the time, he said, even though it's classed as a motorcycle, they were designing it to meet four-wheel vehicle FMVSS crash requirements. I don't know.
There's no way, Sam. There's
well,
no
like I said,
way. Look at that
yeah.
thing.
No, I agree.
Yeah,
I'm not,
Side impact.
there's no way.
I'm
There's
not
no way.
disagreeing with you. I'm just
Yeah.
saying that was their design intent.
I know, but they say things like that, and then the public thinks, oh, it meets all the safety standards. I mean, their literature, I don't know if it still does, but it did in years past, meets all the safety standards. And I went and looked at, and I thought, this is hoodwinking people.
But they did recently do a 300-mile road trip
So
with
what?
the prototype.
So what? Put it in production, make saleable units, and then I'll start reporting about it. But I refuse to, because I think they've cheated a lot of people out of money in the fact that they have not come to market.
Okay,
That road trip, though,
let's not talk about Aptera, but we'll go back to the question. To mention ELMS, that they were going to have these simple trucks and
well, they were going to import them from China.
Right.
Yeah.
Well,
This is built up from China.
This is before there was even an issue.
Right.
Yeah.
vis-a-vis
Coda?
China.
And I was on the Coda launch.
Well,
And-
why I have such heartburn with the Slate, and I don't. I want them to win, obviously, because they're US based and Michigan based, although building in Indiana, according to TechCrunch.
Yeah, no, that's right.
But I don't know why they throw out the $25,000 bogey. It just creates like Ford with the Lightning starting at 40,000, with Cybertruck starting at. It's just an unrealistic number, especially with the backdrop of tariffs. Because even if it's built in the United States, it's going to need something from China that's going to cost twice as much now, almost twice as much. So
No, all fair stuff. I think the price is actually going to be a little bit higher than that. But if the $7,500 credit is still around and hasn't gone away yet, right? It's going to be a very attractive price. My concern for them is I think the volume that they need for their plant is higher than what I think they're going to be able to achieve.
okay.
But I'm very excited about the truck.
Oh, we had we had Robert Bollinger on the show.
Yeah, right.
Couple times.
Couple of times.
And he's suing his company.
Oh, is he really?
Yeah, I mean, it's
Well, who
basically
bought it?
Mullen.
Mullen bought it. Yeah.
Right. So there are all these companies that start up and just
But
don't
here's what
seem
I'll
to-
say is the people behind not the investors. There's billionaires who are putting their money to get Slate launched.
That's a
The
good thing.
people doing all the work are people that
know what they're
that
doing.
You guys know. People who have been in the industry for a long, long time. They know how to hit FMVSS safety standards. They know how to put up a supply chain. They know how to deck this
But
stuff.
this
down.
is where
Sandy
this is
Monroe
the,
worked
but,
for
Sandy
Aptera.
Monroe's done work for them.
but this is where I got to push back.
Yeah.
I don't know how much that matters now.
I agree too. No, I agree. I'm excited because the process that the product development process that they're using wows me. I mean, they've pulled this all together in a very short amount of time. None of it leaked out. None of it leaked until last week. And it only leaked because I think one of those billionaires spilled their guts to TechCrunch.
Basically,
He wanted to
that was
gin
a
up some
plan. That
attention.
was a plan. Yeah, that was planned. That was a plan.
trying to build up excitement.
And Yeah, since you say that, I look at it differently.
So,
because I don't want it
correct.
to be recycled
Right.
auto guys that are just like incrementally reducing costs. They do need to think differently
Right.
and look at things
Right.
differently and start from nothing
Yeah,
as
they
opposed to
took
like
a first principles approach
Okay, good,
to everything that they did.
Yeah.
Good.
So did Tesla. How's that working out for him in California?
Well, Tesla, it went off the rails.
well, Tesla, because of so many other reasons, but there's still multiples more valuable than the rest of
Yeah.
the
Here's
field.
the other thing,
So-
too. It came out today. Tesla sales down 15%, 15% in California. I would have thought it would be down 80%, the way the media is hyping, and especially California, liberal bastion and hating Elon's guts. A 15% drop in sales is not good, but it's far less than I thought it would be.
They're also doing a
All right.
lot of incentives.
So John, that 15% has to be put in context that the others are up 35%.
Oh, yeah,
Okay.
right.
And in that last year, they were 55.5%
Sure,
in
market.
Q1 share market. Now they're down to 43.9%.
Oh, yeah.
So just saying, oh, they're only down 15%.
I think the other thing is what's really important is some of the guys that I trust from a forecasting standpoint said they're going to shrink this year.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
They're absolutely going
I trust Sam. What does Sam say?
Oh, they're definitely going to be down, probably somewhere in the neighborhood of 30% this year, because I mean their shrinkage in Europe is way more than it is here, and also significant shrinkage in China. So yeah, they're going to be down a lot this year, and that's when you also factor in that their take rate on stuff like FSD is declining. They're not going to be able to launch a true robotaxi service, so they're not going to get any revenue from that. What we talked about earlier in China, they were counting on being able to really launch FSD in China. They're not going to be able to do that.
Look, this is why
That was
BYD.
never-
That's not.
That was
that's
never
not
guaranteed for success anyway, just
Yeah.
because of the number of competitors.
Yeah, exactly.
In China
So-
or
in China.
Yeah.
Yeah. And
So-
I think BYD announced, hey, FSD for free from us.
Yeah,
just
I
to put
wouldn't-
a torpedo in Tesla.
Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised if Tesla negative net income this year, probably every quarter this year.
Wow.
Remember, they have 1 million units they need to get rid of out of Shanghai Giga. So the pressure to export to Japan, to Korea, to Australia, the non-European, because they're still exporting to Europe from Shanghai. And so I don't know what that means for Berlin Giga, but
That plant is running at maybe 25% capacity. at best.
exactly.
What,
Berlin?
Berlin?
Or
Yeah, Berlin.
Exactly. So it's and they have requirements from the Shanghai government, I believe, that you
Yeah,
need
it was
to
part
have,
of the deal to get the land and everything and get the support to build it. Was that they have to sell a certain number of units, and they have to they have money they have to pay back to the Shanghai government.
And I think the Chinese government wants a strong Tesla because it'll continue to bring attention to the entire sector. Not necessarily buying Teslas, but they'll buy more EVs, generally speaking. And so weak Tesla, especially with Xiaomi having that big controversy and how long that hangs out there, is going to create a lot of uncertainty this year for the China market. So
Anything? What?
Someone in the comments is wondering if you have any sense of what Chinese buyers think of Tesla currently and Elon Musk.
Yeah. Oh, so I'm going to repeat the question because Sean is saying that there's a question in the chat room that people want you to opine on. What are Chinese people thinking? Chinese car buyers thinking about Tesla these days with all the controversy?
the weird thing is, Elon has injected himself into the political discourse in the United States and in Europe. He hasn't done that in China. And so the reasons, I would say large reasons for the sales declines in California, and I would look at California more than I would look at the United States, and then I would look at Europe. Those reasons are political, I believe. In China, it's just that there's so much competition. And to go from last gen Model Y to Juniper was a baby step. FSD is not actually FSD. They're still charging $8,000 for it. and it's an also ran. There's nothing that stands out from that standpoint. And John and I, unless you guys are going to see some really amazing vehicles that are probably going to take out the Model Y from a sales standpoint even more past the summer, because we'll get into summertime. The real numbers start showing up in September, October, November. And based on these initial numbers for the next few months, Tesla is going to do maybe more financing. So non-price price cuts. And in the China market, what happens is they show something at this price. When it's actually ready for production, they already reduced the price. So they price cut themselves a little bit just because how dynamic the market is.
So basically what you're saying is that in China, it's not an issue the same way.
It's a product issue.
It's a product issue, that there are competitors out there that have superior product.
In China, the Model Y interior looks like a DD car or an Uber car. And, the single, I think I'm actually very impressed with the resilience of the brand in China, despite not having very, effectively one car, because the Model 3 sells okay, but China is like the United States, the crossover SUV. And so not taking it away, Model Y was the number one EV last year, or 2 years ago, number one vehicle last year. But that's a lot of eggs in one basket.
Yeah, good point.
And when there are 93 debuts, there's probably a few of them that'll compete pretty well, pretty significantly with the Model Y.
Yeah. Hey, look, we got to wrap things up just so we don't drag the audience this much longer. But it's been a great show. Thule, Sino Auto Insights, great to have you. Sam Abuelsamid from Telemetry, great having you here. And Gary, I'll be out next week.
You'll be in Shanghai.
You'll have a show to do.
We'll have the head of Fanuc Robotics here, who we'll probably talk.
We'll take a
You'll
lot of
probably talk
selfies
about
and
robots.
send them over.
Yeah, that's right. Anyway, I want to thank all of you for having tuned in. All right.